And the fire in the darkest night, the phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame that
Welcome
ignites
back to
the
From the
heart.
Ashes, everyone. I am your host, Valerie Huang Beck, and today it is time for a solo cast. I've had a really great couple of weeks and had a huge personal breakthrough in the past week. So I figured today's time to round up my thoughts a little bit and share a little bit more about my world and what's going on. I just finished about 10 days of doing a professional dance gig where I performed in a parade 4 times a day, 25 minutes each parade. For those of you who know me, you know which parade it is. And it was a very unique experience. But what was unique about it was more the act of doing something, showing up every day, and having this container where everything is structured to be the same. And so when I accepted doing this job, I came into it with this sense of curiosity. It's kind of like doing your own Groundhog Day. If anyone out there knows that movie with Bill Murray, he wakes up each day and finds himself in a loop, waking up to the same day. And he kind of has to go through the same day again and again. But he has this feeling he's done this before and that each day he has a new opportunity to do something different. And it turns out to be a really spiritual movie. And so I was like, I want to be doing the same thing for 10 days. Let's see what I can discover about myself too. And I got a lot more out of this than I bargained for. In the past, when I've done something very concentrated like this, I've had little windows of what it feels like to be whole, perfect, and complete. I've done a lot of personal growth work in my life over the years because one of my core wounds, I would say, is that I don't feel accepted by other people, that I don't feel like part of everybody else's world, that I'm somehow excluded. And so a lot of my life, I've walked around feeling like I don't belong and that there's something wrong with me. And I once did this yoga nidra retreat where I had to do yoga nidra for multiple times a day. And I had this aha moment in it that I don't have to do anything. I'm here. And by being here, everything is good. I'm where I need to be. I don't need to try so hard. And within that window of time, I was able to feel whole, perfect, and complete. Now, for those of you who know this concept, you'll also know that this is not an intellectual feeling. This is not something where, like, oh, I feel this way. It's actually an inner knowing. And so it's actually difficult to grasp this. So when I am able to, it's not like an aha where I suddenly realize, oh, like I'm whole, perfect, and complete. But there is this feeling of ease. And what I describe it as is this ability to be present with reality now, to be in the here and now. And I was talking to somebody earlier today about what is this feeling? Because I was with the same people for 10 days. And so I was really able to see what was going on, the good, the bad, the ugly. And rather than judging it, rather than reacting to it, I was able to just accept all that happens. And I was able to also accept any kind of mistakes I made during those 10 days. And because of that, I could see that I was really able to enjoy my time, to really enjoy my reality, and had nothing to do with the external reality. It was all my perception of what was going on within me. So this brings me to something I've been reflecting on, and that is that everyone has this immense power within them. And this immense power allows us to lead from authenticity and creativity. But the key is to recognize that you have your own power and your own innate worth. Now, a lot of us believe that our worth comes from our accomplishments or external validation. We often get stuck in waiting for external validation, in the form of fame, money, praise. And then when we get rejected, we find it as proof that we are not worthy, that we are not powerful. But this is so far from the actual truth. And I see it within all of the clients that I work with, right? The people in Club Phoenix that I coach, everyone that comes to me working on themselves, I see that they have this spark within them already. They have this beautiful power to lead, to create, to inspire. A lot of them are artists, a lot of them are leaders, even in the wellness space. But oftentimes they struggle to experience their own internal innate power and worth because they're trying to hide behind other people's validation. They're waiting for someone else to recognize that they are worthy. If only they were able to see the power that they already have, they would be unstoppable. So I just finished reading this book called The Courage to Be Disliked. It's by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. And I want to share a bit of the book with you. Recently, I've been diving heavily into philosophy because I've realized that many of my beliefs, they seem a little bit counterculture. And sometimes I'm left wondering, am I just really anti-society? Am I really anti-authority? Like, what's going on? And some of this is true. But what I'm getting at and what I'm discovering is that I hold really strong convictions in how we can shift our mindsets to be at peace with ourselves and harmonious with others. And that a lot of us are missing this inner and outer harmony because of the way that we're living our lives. And so I believe that it is time to question a lot of what we think that we know and a lot of the beliefs that society has put upon us. This has been a wonderful read. When I found out about this book, I knew immediately that I wanted to read it. And I got this recommendation for the book from Derek Sivers, who's one of my favorite thought leaders, and it was on his website with a bunch of notes. If you haven't heard of Derek Sivers, definitely check out some of his interviews. They're all over the internet. His ideas are really spicy and refreshing, especially in a world where everyone seems bent on controlling what everyone else does and what they believe. So, anyway, this book is really special because it is written as a dialogue between a philosopher and a young man. And the young man is really struggling with this notion of being happy, and he's wondering if he could ever be happy in his own life. But rather than seeking the philosopher's help, he's actually angry. He wants to disprove what the philosopher is saying. And what I love about this book is that the philosopher is there to just listen and feedback what the young man is saying. And so throughout the book, it's an exposition on Adlerian psychology, which is something that I actually hadn't heard of before I opened this book. But now that I know of it, I'm just super curious and want to learn a lot more. The book is called The Courage to Be Disliked, the Japanese phenomenon that shows you how to change your life and achieve real happiness. Now, I want to even just look at that title because it's saying that basically the courage to be disliked is the key to achieve real happiness. And we have to think about the word courage because, again, a lot of us base our own value on external validation like fame, money, and praise. We're afraid that we're not going to get those things. And we're afraid to be disliked because it takes away those things. And what this title is saying is that if we really want to be happy, the core of it, we need to be okay with never getting any of those things. And so I am going to read one of my favorite chapters in this book. It's called Deny the Desire for Recognition. And then let's talk about it afterwards. Deny the desire for recognition. The youth says, "So you said that today we would discuss freedom." And the philosopher replies, "Yes. Do you have any time to think about what freedom is?" The youth says, "Yes, actually. I thought about it at great length." The philosopher replies, "And did you arrive at any conclusions?" The youth says, "Well, I couldn't find any answers, but I did find this. It's not my own idea, but something that I came across at the library. A line from a novel by Dostoevsky. Quote, 'Money is coined freedom.' Unquote. What do you think? Isn't coined freedom a rather refreshing term? But seriously, I was fascinated to find this one line that drove right to the heart of this thing called money." The philosopher replies, "I see. Certainly, if one were to speak in a very general sense of the true nature of that which is brought about by money, one might say that it that is freedom. It is an astute observation to be sure. But you wouldn't go so far as to say that freedom, therefore, is money, would you?" The youth replies, "It's exactly as you say. There probably is freedom that can be gained by way of money. And I'm sure that freedom is greater than we imagine. Because in reality, all necessities of life are dealt with through financial transactions. Does it follow then that if one possesses great wealth, one can be free? I don't believe that is the case. Would certainly like to believe that it is not the case and that human values and human happiness cannot be bought with money." The philosopher answers, "Well, say for the moment that you have obtained financial freedom. And then, though you have gained great wealth, you have not found happiness. At that time, what problems and privations would remain for you?" And the youth replies, "It would be the interpersonal relationships that you have been mentioning. I have thought deeply about this matter. For instance, you might be blessed by great wealth, but not have anyone who loves you. You have no comrades whom you could call friends, and you are not liked by anyone. This is a great misfortune. Another thing I can't get out of my head is the word bonds. Every one of us is tangled up and writhing in these strings that we call bonds. Having to be attached to a person you don't even care for example, or to always watch out for your awful boss's mood swings. Imagine, if you could be released from such petty interpersonal relationships, how easy things would be. But no one can really do such a thing. Wherever we go, we are surrounded by other people, and we are social individuals who exist in our relations to other people. No matter what we do, we cannot escape the strong rope of our interpersonal relationships. I see now that Adler's statement, 'all problems are interpersonal relationship problems,' is a great insight." The philosopher says, "It's a crucial point. Let's dig a little deeper. What is it about our interpersonal relationships that is robbing us of our freedom?" The youth replies, last time, you spoke about whether one thinks of other people as enemies or as comrades. You said that if one becomes able to see others as one's comrades, one's way of looking at the world should change as well. That certainly makes sense. I felt quite convinced the other day when I left here. But then what happened? I gave the matter some careful thought, and I noticed that there are aspects of interpersonal relationships that can't be completely explained. The philosopher answers, "Like what?" The youth says, "The most obvious one is the existence of parents. I can never think of parents as enemies. During my childhood, especially, they were my greatest guardians who raised and protected me. In that regard, I'm sincerely grateful. Still, my parents were strict people. I told you about this last time, that they always compared me to my older brother and refused to recognize me. And they have constantly made comments about my life, saying I should study more, not make friends with people like this or that, get into university at the very least, get this kind of job, and so on. Their demands put a lot of pressure on me and were certainly bonds." And the philosopher asks, "Then what did you end up doing?" The youth says, "It seems to me that until I started university, I was never able to ignore my parents' intentions. I was anxious, which was unpleasant, but the fact of the matter is that my wishes always seemed to end up overlapping with my parents'. My place of work I chose myself, however." And the philosopher says, "Now that you mention it, I haven't heard about that yet. What kind of work do you do?" Now the youth replies, "I'm now working as a librarian at a university library. My parents wanted me to take on my father's printing plant, like my brother did. Because of this, ever since I started my current job, our relationship has been somewhat strained. If they weren't my parents and instead were enemy like presences in my life, I probably wouldn't have minded at all. Because no matter how much they might have tried to interfere, I could always ignore them. But as I've said, parents are, to me, are not enemies. Whether or not they are comrades is another matter. But at the very least, they are not what I would call enemies. It's a relationship that is much too close to be able to just ignore their intentions. And the philosopher replies, when you decided which university you would go to in line with your parents' wishes, what sort of emotion did you feel with regard to your parents? And the youth says, it's complicated. I did have feelings of resentment, but on the other hand, there was this sense of relief too. That I could get them to recognize me if I went to that school. And the philosopher asks, you could get them to recognize you? And the youth replies, come on, let's stop the roundabout leading questions. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. It's the so called desire for recognition. It's interpersonal relationship problems in a nutshell. We human beings live in a constant need of recognition from others. It is precisely because the other person is not an abhorrent enemy that one wants recognition from him, isn't it right? Isn't it? So, yes, that's right. I wanted to be recognized by my parents. And the philosopher says, I see. Let's talk about one of the major premises of Adlerian psychology regarding this matter. Adlerian psychology denies the need to seek recognition from others. And the youth replies, it denies the desire for recognition? And the philosopher answers, there is no need to be recognized by others. Actually, one must not seek recognition. This point cannot be overstated. And it goes on to the next chapter. So, there are a few points from this passage that I wanted to discuss and see what you all think about it too. Because a lot of this book is this youth being triggered and challenged by what the philosopher is saying. And I can imagine that a lot of us who are reading this book would probably be similarly triggered or challenged. And the first point that I wanted to discuss in this chapter is the idea that we surrender our freedom when we focus on getting recognition from others. And another way to probably say this is that we become enslaved by our desire to be recognized by others. And it has nothing to do with whether that person recognizes us or not, but we become dependent on that as our determinant for how happy we are, how much we think we're valued. And if you think about that, I want you to also just reflect on what situations in life have you been craving recognition from others, whether that be your boss who you think you should pay you more money, or your parents who you feel like you've done everything for. There are a lot of these strings that are attached to our relationships because we feel like we are something owed by other people. And it's not something that we do to be malicious or to really impose these obligations on them, but that's how we feel driven to feel connected to them. But if we think about it, these aren't really clean relationships then, because we're constantly seeking that external validation. And it is something, or I believe that it's kind of like trying to feed this hungry ghost. When is it ever going to be enough? When do you determine that it is enough? The thing is, like, if you're always trying to gain your sense of value from others and you aren't able to do it for yourself, there's always a hole that needs to be filled. And so I also want to ask then, well, how does it feel to have someone else dictate what you should pursue, who you should befriend, and what you should do with your life? So, in a lot of Asian cultures, especially, we feel very strongly obligated to follow filial piety, to listen to our parents and what they think we should do for our lives. And at some point, we do make the sacrifice to do so if we are following these societal beliefs. So there's no right or wrong here, would say, in terms of what you choose. But then also, we need to acknowledge that there are consequences if there are opposing desires between you and, let's say, your parents. And you choose one over the other. There's dissonance, right? And that creates that resentment. And so I love how this book is allowing us to question whether this dissonance should exist and whether it's valuable for us to make this sacrifice. If you have a very strong calling to do something, a very strong calling for you to contribute to the world in a certain way, and the expectations that you perceive are put on you by your elders or your authority figures, when that goes against what you truly want, what is the consequence of that for yourself? So, just like the youth in the story, I've lived for the longest time operating under the desire to gain positive recognition, not just from my parents and relatives. That was very, very strong. And I'm really lucky to have supportive parents. But it expanded to a lot of other authority figures in general, and that's when I started to realize how problematic this was, because not only was I trying to listen to my parents, but I was also trying to listen to my teachers. Also trying to listen to my professors. I was also trying to listen to every single person that I saw as authority figure above me. And the thing is, if you have so many authority figures above you, they're going to have conflicting interests, not only just with you, but with each other. And then comes that confusion of what should I do with my life? I try to do everything right and listen to everybody that's important to me. But then again, I never gave myself the time to listen to what I truly want. And I was not trusting my own experience, not listening to my inner desire or what my soul felt called to do. And so I actually very much feel aligned with this idea that we should discard our desires for recognition from others if we truly want to be happy. So give it a good think, and I would love to hear how this is landing for you, because I can see that it could be very challenging. So, another thing I really like about this book that I have mentioned is that it is a dialogue between a youth and a philosopher. And in the book, they're having a discussion or an argument, even. And in the book, also, the philosopher at some point says that if you truly want to have freedom in your relationships, you should have horizontal relationships rather than vertical ones. And you cannot have both in your life. Either all of your relationships are horizontal or all are vertical. And what he's getting at is that if you have vertical relationships, there's always some hierarchy between you and other people, whether that be someone's below you or above you. It makes it very difficult for you to be able to relate with other people and have open discussions and arguments, because either you believe that they should be listening to you or you should be listening to them. So it creates a lot of one-sided recommendations. And the philosopher very clearly states to the youth, you are a friend to me. And the way that we were having this dialogue would not be possible if we had a vertical relationship. I really love this because it sets the example up for what is healthy dialogue. Like, the philosopher leaves ample room for the youth to disagree with him. He doesn't dismiss his arguments, and he tries his best to help the youth see and understand what he's trying to get at. And it is really refreshing, because in a lot of these teacher-student relationships, oftentimes it's do as I say, believe what I say. One thing that I've struggled with in many of my past attempts in learning is treating teachers like a godlike authority. And this is something that has been conditioned into us. And I fall into relationships where this is the default, and it does not feel good. And it's not that I believe that my teachers were God figures, but the way that the relationship was set up, I felt like I didn't have the freedom to ask questions about what they were teaching. It also implied that they had some higher spiritual level or knowledge that I couldn't obtain, which made them better, and therefore I should do what they say. And it led to me really not trusting my own path. And this really created years and years of suffering and just not knowing what I should do with my life. Yeah, it doesn't really set up a student for true learning or true success. And we live in a world where, because I say so, simply doesn't produce beneficial results anymore. And I think it's become really important to me that we learn how to healthily question things. If you find yourself in a situation where you don't feel comfortable asking questions or arguing a point, I actually really urge you to take a step back and see if that is a healthy setting for intellectual and personal inquiry. Because at the end of the day, we are the person experiencing our own lives. And it's really important for us to get to know ourselves and to love ourselves innately. Okay, so that is a lot of what I wanted to say for today. And I would really encourage you to check out this book, The Courage to Be Disliked. I'm probably going to end up reading it again and see what you see for yourself. And if you are getting triggered, I want to hear what it is that is triggering you. Like I said, this book sets up such a great example of what dialogue for learning should be. It's a conversation. It's not a shooting down of someone who is lesser. It's allowing people to entertain their thoughts and allowing them to figure out the arguments for themselves and come to their own conclusions. So be an active participant. When you hear and observe works of art, podcasts, what is it that you are taking for yourself? And what is it that you want to question? Because it's in the questioning where the true growth happens. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for listening and hope that you tune in to the next episode of From the Ashes. Have a great week. Hey, listeners, if you're enjoying the stories and insights from the Ashes, why not stay connected with our community? Join my mailing list for bi-weekly updates on upcoming events, wellness tips, fun tidbits, and of course, new podcast episodes. I promise no spam, just valuable content to help you live your best life. Head over to www.intrepidwellness.life and sign up today. Don't miss out, and let's keep the conversation going.